And we are live.
All right, look at that. Wow.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So this is a little bit of a departure from my normal coffee chats. So normally we just chat. We have a coffee chat, we talk about it. However, this time, Cesar and I just went to the Tableau Conference last week. Have you caught up on sleep yet, Cesar?
I'm getting there. I'm still kind of falling asleep in weird places. So.
Yeah. So we went to the Tableau Conference last week, and we spoke on the last day of the conference about, so you've been to the Tableau Conference 2024, now what? And so we thought this would be a really perfect thing to bring to the coffee chats. So we're going to kind of do the presentation. We have the slides, but we're also going to kind of just like chat as we go through it. Also, for anyone who could make it live, we have the chat open, and we should be able to see most of the comments. Sometimes some of them don't come through. So you can share your experiences, your questions and stuff. And we also have a handout. I just put it on my LinkedIn profile, and I will, for those watching this later, because this will be recorded, I'll put it like as like a link on like the video and stuff. And it's featured on my LinkedIn profile. So without further ado, Cesar, are you ready to get started?
I think so.
Okay, let me figure out this present. We're doing that live. So let's see. Slides.
It's kind of nice that we can actually do this in this format, because it's not necessarily the full-on presentation, but it's also kind of just a way to chat through a lot of what we presented, and also kind of personalize it too for folks that may not have been at the conference. So I dig it.
All right.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Share. And then slideshow. All right. Oh, this means that I can't see our faces anymore.
Oh no. Okay. Well,
I wonder if the stream can see our faces or not.
We're still here. I think so. I'm getting the live view on my side, and I've got both of us on top of each other.
Okay. So I guess I'm just not going to see it, which is also common to Zoom. So this is our conference start slide here, and it does. So our agenda generally, and we're going to introduce ourselves in a second. I'm conscious that I haven't yet introduced Cesar, but he's going to do it in a second. So here's our agenda, basically, of like during Tableau Conference or conferences in general. During the session, we're going to talk more about conference tips, because we're cognizant that like this isn't the Tableau Conference anymore, and so people might want just tips on how to succeed at conferences, because when we presented this was the last day. And then immediately after and getting back to work, kind of similar things, and then in the future. So we kind of chunked it into different periods of time, and we have our stories mixed in there. So these are our hosts. I'm Annie. If you don't know me, I'd be surprised, but I'm a data analyst at GitLab and also a content creator. But Cesar, go ahead. You can let us know who you are.
So I am pretty much a BI guy of all kinds and trades. I'm usually well known for centers of excellence and or centers of enablement at a lot of organizations and putting those together. So working with folks, kind of imagine kind of like a one-stop shop. If you had questions about your data sources or your dashboards, or really just kind of you're stuck on a calc, needed a little bit of help to get past that level of being stuck. So yeah, I think kind of what makes it fun to do this presentation also about conference is that we kind of have both sides of the coin here. I think, Annie, this was your second conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I've been there, I don't want to say maybe 9 times or so. So it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot that you can experience at the Tableau Conference that you can bring back and have a lot of success with.
Yeah, we met last year at the conference, but I will share that story later. Okay, so during the conference, we took all the slides about during the conference, chunked them into one, and on my LinkedIn, I just shared a handout with a lot of the tips that we're going to go through. So the biggest and first and foremost tip for this is just break the ice. Basically, I realized after my first year that a lot of people in the tech world are introverts and feel really uncomfortable going out and networking. And so especially if you go to meetups, like this year I went to a server admin meetup. Last year, I think I went to like a newbies meetup or something. And I remember just feeling super, super uncomfortable. And every time someone would come up to me and introduce themselves, I would be so relieved. I'd be like, oh, Thank goodness you have introduced yourself, so then you have broken the ice. And so everyone wants someone to do it. So you can be a little hero by just going and doing it. And even if you feel awkward, I mean, think about if someone came up to you and introduced themselves. You wouldn't be thinking that person's awkward. You'd be thinking, thank goodness they did that. So Cesar seems to have no problems with this. Are you an extrovert, Cesar?
I'm kind of the most extroverted introvert you'll probably ever meet. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I can be incredibly extroverted, but I think I kind of need that little space to kind of just catch up and be introverted for a bit and catch up with everything. But I mean, what's always fascinated me about the conference is, the people that you'll meet. You never know who you'll just kind of run into. And it's kind of happened where, I've talked to somebody over lunch or talked to somebody on an airplane that was going to the conference as well, or maybe just kind of walking together to the conference. And they've actually become some pretty lifelong friends. And it's funny, but exactly just breaking the ice and finding a cool way or something to kind of talk about, something to kind of engage with too. I think it's funny. We kind of met at the conference in an interesting way. I think we were both trying to watch the same session.
Yeah, we were both trying to watch the same session. Cesar is a very good example of making a friend at the conference. Cesar and I are both watching a session, and at the Tableau conference, they do like these silent disco style things. Last year they did where they had like these headphones that you would wear that the speakers would speak and it would go into it. And the room was like kind of dark. And so we both got into a session that there was no more headphones. And I was honestly pretty tired and not in the mood for socializing. But I was standing next to Cesar and he was like, I have a trick. If you go and get headphones from another session, which you're not supposed to do, and bring them back, I'll hack them into the frequency of this session. But then we just started chatting and everyone ended up going and getting the headphones. And when we came back from the conference, we stayed friends, and then we ended up presenting at the conference together this year. And so that was a good success story of just like talking to someone. So some of my tips for at the conference, and also I figured out how to see the chat. So let us know in the chat if you have been to a conference, if you have been to the Tableau conference, or if you have any upcoming conferences, so that when we're speaking, because we can see the chat, we can kind of like adjust this presentation to who's here and your experiences. So let us know. Also, I can feature some of them if you want to like tell a fun story. Featuring is like doing this, where you can see.
There you go. There's Scott. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, one of the cool things about also just kind of being the person at like a conference with a little bit of experience too, something I try to do is, I try to be the networker too. I try to find folks, hey, so-and-so is looking for server admin. Have you met Annie? Or have you, really, it's kind of that you're from Yakima, Washington. Oh, geez, look, I just met this person from Yakima, Washington too. So it's always kind of fun to kind of do that as well. If you've had a lot more experience at conferences, and it's always kind of fun to be that connector. It's insane what you and the people you can connect and some of the deals that you can help kind of foster during the conference too.
Oh, wow. Look at this. Speaking at a machine learning week. That's pretty cool. Terrified of networking. No, so I'm totally comfortable speaking. Terrified of networking totally makes sense to me, because when you are speaking, it's just like people are just there to listen to you and you get to talk about what you're interested in. Whereas like when you're networking, there's like, you have to figure out all like the back and forth and like what should I say? What should I do? So a conference tip that I have for networking, well, a couple of them. So first of all, when you come into situations, have like your elevator pitch ready, like before a conference, be prepared with like, this is what I do. And when you go into different things, think about like a couple of fun facts that are related. And so like if you go to a server admin meetup, have like a fun fact around like a time that your entire server melted down and there was like, everything was going wrong. Not fun, but funny. And then a thing that I did this year is I had a bag of Laffy Taffies, which is a candy, and they have jokes on the outside of them. And so I went to this meetup and just around at the conference, and I would hand people a Laffy Taffy that I didn't know and say, hey, I got this for you, but you have to read me at least one of the jokes. And like, it was awkward, and like they laughed awkwardly and I laughed awkwardly, but it was very successful because then the ice was successfully broken. They like told me the joke and we like had something to talk about to get started. And then we could kind of, you know, jump into, oh, how do you know about this thing? So having like some kind of like a fun little, I thought about another one is like, you know, asking everybody, if you're really into music, everyone that you talk to, like, what is your song, like the song of the conference, and like making a playlist of everyone's song of the conference, I feel like could be really cool. So you could find little gimmicks, have your elevator pitch, have your fun fact. Another thing is look around when you're at the conference of like, who's going to the same sessions as you. And so if you notice, like the Tableau conference is 3 days. So if you notice that you're seeing the same person at multiple sessions, that's a really good point of introduction to like, hey, like not to be weird or anything, but I noticed that this is the 3rd session we've been at together. I just wanted to introduce myself. And when you're in sessions, you can actually sit kind of more in the middle of a row because people like to sit on the outsides. So if you sit in the middle and like leave space open, don't have your bags blocking the chairs next to you, then it gives people the opportunities to sit next to you. And similarly, at meals, even if you come to a conference with your friends or your colleagues, meal times are a really good way to sit with other people you don't know yet and just, you know, say, hey, is this seat taken? And then you can strike up a conversation. Cesar, someone messaged you about this after. You want to tell that story?
Which one was that? Sorry.
Did someone message you about how she had done this right after at the mealtime? Or was that on Twitter?
Hang on, let's see here.
Okay, no, it's okay. I can share that story. I got a message.
Yes. That's right. That's right. We did have somebody who came to our session, and they sent me feedback. Sorry, you caught me cold there. They sent me feedback about really how they took some of the tips that we just talked about in the session and went and just met somebody new at the at lunch. They were actually just sitting at the table over lunch and made a new connection, made a new contact. And it's fun. It's just kind of, it's one of those little things where everybody's there for the same reason, you know. And it's funny, really. Data is kind of data. I mean, there's some intricacies, but I know, you know, if I meet somebody in the healthcare field, I talk about, you know, just data and like, well, how do you get through all the HIPAA stuff? How do you deal with that with your Tableau server? And how it really, it's just kind of more curiosity. But, you know, knowing kind of what the differences are between different industries, you know, it's just, you know, now I'm in telecom, and there's a lot of GIS and geospatial work.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to talk to people about that. You know, it's interesting. People hear that and they're like, oh, you must be mapping all the time. And yeah, it's kind of fun to have those conversations.
Yeah. So some of the people that Scott here was at, this was his 3rd conference. And then I think you also said that you, speaking for the first time on 2 different topics and got stage fright for my first, where my mind just totally went blank. It happens. Scott, you can tell us what you're speaking about, and I'll feature that, what your session like title was and what you were speaking about. But that is something that happens, just kind of like where on just full disclosure to everybody, our session that we did, this one was on Wednesday, which was after data night out, and Cesar and I were both up pretty late. And I was super thankful that I mostly got through the presentation without my brain just being like wiped clean.
But yeah. I think after presenting, though, I think the 2 of us were completely drained.
No,
after we kind of left it on stage, which is great.
This Juliet was at the first conference, and you guys met at the community event. That's cool. There was somebody who went to this presentation at the Tableau conference that we did, that I was at a Tableau user group in New York City on Wednesday, and he was there because later on we'll talk about Tableau user groups. And so I'm happy to hear that this, you know, the connections that we make come out of the conference.
I think that's kind of, you know, proof positive that this worked. So, you know, we went through and we kind of helped folks kind of discover a little bit more about their communities and what else they can do outside of just going to conference. Or, you know, some folks were, you know, they went to conference because, well, you know, my boss told me I should do this, or, you know, works at me. But there's a lot more you can kind of get out of conference, and you can kind of continue this too. So.
Yeah, this one, my opening line during meetups this year was essentially, "Hey, you look interesting. I'm going to bug you for a while." And that's, I mean, I think, like we all have our funny little ways of breaking the ice, but I bet you everyone, like if someone said that to me, I'd be like, yes, please. No, I'm here specifically so that people will bug me for a while because I'm interesting. That's the best thing you could say.
Very much so. Very much so.
Sweet. And then Jeremy here, thank you, Scott, by the way. Jeremy and I we went hiking. So just a little plug, next year when I go to the conference, I did a hike on Sunday before the conference this year. And next year I want to schedule it again. And that's where Jeremy and I met, and Jeremy presented. And he was like the last person I spoke to before I left the conference to nap on Wednesday.
Definitely a good conference tip too. There are other things that happen at conference. There are groups that put together morning runs. There are groups that put together. I think somebody was actually trying to do a climbing event, but the scheduling just didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of fun to keep your eye open for some of these because it gives you a chance to meet people. And I mean, I've met people who've met their significant others on some of those hikes, and it's always kind of cool to see just kind of what who's out and about. So it's definitely a cool way of meeting people even before conference, and possibly even having just kind of a friend group to keep bouncing into during a conference.
Yeah, this one that got featured now is Adrian. For whatever reason, sometimes it doesn't bring the name through, but this one is Adrian. So I'm really happy that everyone is participating. Sometimes people participate in these, sometimes people don't. This is like way better than when we're just like talking to a blank screen. Also, Rudy, everybody is super sweet. We had like some coffee chats when he was learning how to become a data analyst and got his first data analyst role.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm really happy for him. So Scott was talking on dashboard documentation and measuring dashboard usage, which I think are unsexy, but very useful. Oh, this is fun. Met his husband on a hike. That's cute.
Oh, look at that. I didn't know that.
This is a good tip. When you're at conferences, if people are alone, usually they're like extra open to somebody interacting with them. So that's a good tip. All right, I'll go to the next slide. We were on this one for a while. So you've been to the conference, you've done your networking. I think I've got all my tips. Otherwise, we have a handout, which I posted on LinkedIn. They're all there. So immediately after, quoting closing time here, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So the first thing, and this is during the event. Oh yeah. So during the event at the Tableau conference, on your badge, they give you a little QR code that you can scan, and it'll bring you to your like LinkedIn, which is super cool. And they'll probably do that again next year for anybody that goes. But so my tip about this is during the conference and then right after the conference, like connect with everyone that you have talked to and liked talking to. So before you leave the conference, if you talk to someone interesting, try and find them and get their email, their LinkedIn, their phone number, whatever works for you. And then what I do is send a message to the people that you enjoyed talking to, and just say, hey, we met at X thing. I really enjoyed talking about blank. It was really great to meet you. And so then they remember who you are, you remember who they are. And then I did this. So last year I met this guy at a meetup that I really enjoyed talking to. And we had talked like this on LinkedIn. So then this year he messaged me and he was like, hey, Annie, are you going to the Tableau conference? And I admittedly at first didn't remember who he was, but then I looked at our LinkedIn messaging history and I was like, right there. I met you at this meetup. So that's a really good way to remember people. Do you have any tips on this before I move on, Cesar?
And I think the big point I always try to make, and I've probably already said it twice or three times, you don't know who you're talking to when you meet people at the conference. I was asked a couple months ago by the CEO of a database company, where do I make purchasing decisions? How do I do I go to Forrester? Do I go to Gartner? Do I where do I find out about these decisions? And I kind of grinned and I'm like, well, it's actually the people that I meet at conference. There are a number of people that I've met, and it's interesting. Some of the best decisions I've made, actually most of my business decisions that I make are from people that are experts in the field. If I know, oh, hey, this person knows a lot about databases, I'll contact them and I'll go, hey, we're looking at purchasing something like this, but I need it to be on the cloud and on-prem, and usually they'll tell you right away what works and what doesn't work because they've been through it. And really, you save a lot of time. A lot of the people that you meet don't waste their time. It's a fun community because a lot of people there are they're doers, as you can see from a lot of the sessions that are kind of broadcasted or that people go to. People actually show you some of the pitfalls and some of the things that kind of really trip them up while they're doing things. So it's fun to be around all these doers. They really know, and they're not going to lead you in the wrong direction. They'll tell you, "Oh, don't try that. It's just such a waste of time or a waste of money." So really a big one.
So the next one is just when you come home from the conference, sit down, journal, blog, whatever, how it is that you think about it, go for a walk. Just kind of think back over them. I learned a really interesting psychology tip that if you sit down and just talk about the day that you've had each day, you're so much more likely to remember what happened in it than if you don't. And the way that you talk about it is important too. So if each day when you come home, you focus on what was my high of the day, what was my low of the day, what could I have done better? And then same thing, apply this to the conference. Then it trains your brain to actually look for those things, and you can have this kind of more positive remembering. So if you just kind of go through this, oh my gosh, the conference was crazy and it was a blur, you'll forget a lot of that. But if you think about, okay, this was my high, this is the thing I was most excited about, this is what I learned, you're actually more likely to be able to think back and remember that event much more clearly. So start by just, yourself, maybe with a close friend, recapping on your learnings.
Rusty points out the data devotional, which I think it's another community event that happens there. It's a morning event, but I think it's also, if you're going to go back and you're kind of going over your day, it's kind of a good way of just kind of getting really just that recap also of things that you're thankful for. I think it reminds me a lot of Went and Paul Chapman years ago had a really, really good session. I think he was with EasyJet at the time about how Tableau literally changed his life. And he's talking about it mostly from a career standpoint of, learning this one software product and how it's kind of opened up all these doors. It was a really good session, but it's kind of one of those things too, where it's like at the end of the day, like Annie said, you just kind of go back and you kind of ponder what you listened to and what you saw, what you heard, and kind of get those. Yeah, exactly. The teddy bear rubber duck technique. I like that. Very, very introspective too, and things you can bring back. Also, I think I referred to it as gifts for the office when you come back. Those little tidbits you pick up along the way. And hey, did you know you could do this? Hey, you remember you were having this problem? I saw somebody at the conference do it this way. So yeah.
This slide is all you, Cesar. Cesar introduced me to the concept of a blueprint assessment. So I was like, you're going to speak on that, and I'm going to listen.
So being part of all these the centers of enablement, when Tableau was putting together the blueprint, I interviewed a little bit with the team about kind of what we did and how we kind of worked and operated in the organization, and they took some of that and they went and talked to a lot of the people that were in the community, and they kind of figured out how to do it right. The blueprint assessment is excellent. If you just Google Tableau blueprint assessment, it takes you right to it really is a survey, and it's one of these adaptive surveys. So based on how you answer the first few questions, it'll give you a lot more questions afterwards. They do change based on what you're looking for. But it takes you through your organization and kind of asks you kind of what's your role within the organization. For me, what I like to look at are the other roles. And I'm like, is that something for me? Is that something I want to do? What can I go back and kind of click on that and see kind of what the questions look like there? It's a really cool assessment. So it lets you kind of determine, from a governance standpoint, where your organization is. It gives me ideas to, what, we should keep track of this. We should actually set up a process for that. And it really helps me kind of plan out my future year. I was telling Annie, actually I told a lot of people that one thing I did when I first took the blueprint assessment was I kind of copied down a lot of the questions and I rephrased them as my goals for that upcoming year. When I went to my boss, it let me go through and goal set within just a 15-minute session of I want our organization to kind of move one step closer to this. And it gave me those steps just by looking at it and going, okay, you know what? Yeah, not only do we want to just kind of have documentation, but do we want to go through and have sessions and show people a lot about what we do. So that's kind of fun. Also, it lets you kind of go back year after year and kind of see if you've made progress towards that.
So it gives you like kind of like a data Tableau like maturity assessment of sorts.
Very much so. Very much so. It's almost like the like the old kind of your GPS there of it's like, hey, am I getting here? Has our organization kind of moved on to this point? I've been working at this for 2-3 years. Have we actually made an impact? And it's kind of fun to come back to year after year.
Oops, that's the wrong direction.
Oh.
So the next kind of step of this, which is we'll kind of circle back to the impact of the blueprint, but now that you're actually getting back to work, what does that look like? So the first thing that we would recommend, and somebody in our session took this advice. I saw him on Wednesday, which is so exciting. Get involved with TUGs. So TUGs are Tableau user groups, and they have them all over the world, I think, but definitely all over the country, all over the world. And see, there's like a New York City Tableau user group, and there's a Washington, D.C. Tableau user group, and an Austin, Texas Tableau user group. And they're free and they're casual. I was bringing my friend to one on Wednesday, and she kept like calling it a conference. I think she thought it was a lot more formal than it was. And then we went and she's like, oh, this is like really chill. Like you just like, it's just in a room with like tables and chairs, and there's just like a nice like presentation, but it's not too formal. And then you just like chat with each other. I was like, yeah, that's what it is. So it's a good place. And so what you can do is you can just start attending. If you're like, okay, I really liked the energy of the Tableau conference, and being in the community with people who are excited about the same things that I am. So it gives you that opportunity. But you can also present at them. And so Tableau user group leaders are always looking for people to present. And so what you could do, if you're working on improving your presentations and public speaking skills and stuff, it's a very informal, laid back environment to say, hey, can I just do a presentation of like my favorite talks from the Tableau conference? Or like, I learned about mapping at the Tableau conference, and then I went home and I was so excited about it, and I want to just share back what I've done. And the nice thing is you don't have to be an expert. A lot of people at them are more entry level, or they're senior and they like to mentor. So you don't need to be like the world's renowned expert on mapping in Tableau. You can just share as you're learning and saying, hey, I learned these cool things about maps. Did you know that you can bring in a spatial file? This is kind of what it looks like. And it's a really good way to kind of take home what you've learned and then capitalize on it. Cesar is a Tableau user group leader, so he's a big advocate.
They're a lot of fun. Sometimes they can be everything from a show and tell of something fun that you built, possibly for work or possibly not. That you might like hockey or basketball or really rock climbing. Something cool you might want to put together, and you might come up with a cool way of displaying things that might seem new and unique too. So go out and share it. It's fun to get people to come in and present for the first time, because for the most part they're just kind of opening up, and I've been blown away by first time presenters. We've had folks from the journalism industry just come in and completely blow us away with some of the things that they've been working on. But yeah, really, it's a great way to just kind of share what you know. And sometimes it can be kind of the fringes of Tableau. It might be, if you work a lot in machine learning, how do you bring that into Tableau, and how do you kind of, what does that mean for a lot of folks? Because in some cases people are possibly only visualizing, or if they want to know more about databases and kind of what happens with the SQL and how that all works. That's kind of a fun one to bring in too. So it doesn't necessarily need to be all about visualization.
You want to start this one, Cesar?
Yeah, definitely. So there's something fun that we do. We've done in previous jobs too, where everyone that went to the Tableau conference, we've gotten them together and just did a quick debrief, where in some cases it's like your organization really wanted you to kind of go and bring back some interesting tidbits and make the organization better at visualization and visualizing data. But it's fun to hear from everyone else's experience. Sometimes you hear a completely different experience than the one you went to. They might have actually focused on so many different topics that you never would have thought of. And it's always fun to hear. Like I remember somebody coming back with a tip that they learned about project management by going to a customer session by Caterpillar. And we were in the finance industry, and I'm like, wait, what? And yeah, Caterpillar's project management tools and the way they were visualizing this, like I would have never thought about that. And she went and described it to us, and I'm like, that's brilliant. So it's always kind of fun to bring that back and hear about that. Also, it helps to justify that cost for the future year. Some organizations pay. Some people were self-funded, and they kind of paid their own way to go. I've known a lot of people who've kind of paid their own way to go, just to kind of keep that learning and really have a little bit of an advantage when it comes to just really what it is that they're learning, and they're kind of building themselves, so their own knowledge base.
Yeah, I really like something that we had thought about originally is like, so a lot of people like to get their employer to pay for them to go to conferences. And if you speak at a conference, usually your ticket is free. But otherwise you have to pay. And so taking good notes on, what you have learned, and then implementing it, like keeping track of like, okay, I learned these things and then I implemented them, and presenting back what you learned to your colleagues is a really good way to kind of make the case for if your company didn't pay for you to go to the conference. Or if before a conference, if you're trying to get them to pay for it and you're not sure if they're going to, like you kind of make it worth their while and say like, okay, I'm going to come back. I'm going to do a formal presentation of these things that I learned. You can, if it's close enough that the sessions are at, you can say, I want to go to these sessions. And then afterwards, actually track and say, okay, here's the things that I was inspired to do after the conference. And then, by the time it comes around next year or the next conference comes up, you can say, and look at, here's the impact of this thing and this thing and this thing. And it would probably make it much smoother for companies to want to pay for you to go to the conference if they're getting benefit out of it. Or at least, I know a lot of people who have had to take off PTO. I did my first year at the conference. At least not having to use your PTO to be there, because it's actually professional development that you're bringing back to your work. So
that's very true. Yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to say, hey, you remember that project that really everyone loved? I learned to do that at the conference. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a little bit of collateral there. So hopefully they can kind of look at that and go, hey, maybe we should send a couple more people this year.
Yeah. So the other way that you can kind of bring the energy home right after the conference is get into the data community online. So my journey into becoming a data analyst and being a data analyst, I haven't yet gotten very much community at work. I mean, we're working on it. My organization just got Tableau in the last year, and we're starting to to build up some internal community. But so far, it's been everything online. So there's a lot of community ways that you can participate, especially if you really are just like psyched about using Tableau and getting better at it. So each week there's these series called Makeover Monday and Workout Wednesday, which are online like challenges in Tableau that you can participate in, totally free. Maven Analytics, they have like monthly dashboarding challenges you can participate in. There is a data set called Real World Fake Data, and it's really good because it has like really realistic data sets that might be something you actually use at work. Not messy, but realistic, like in terms of the type of data. that you can do projects on. And it's really popular on Tableau Public to use that data set. And so you can see how other people have approached the challenge of using that data set to build a dashboard after or before you publish yours. And then back to Viz Basics. I just learned about at the conference is like really good for beginners who are learning about the basics of using Tableau. But that's not an exhaustive list. There are so many different community events. I think the New York City Tableau user group is having a competition in May. It's due May 24th, where you submit a project based on like a Tableau dashboard based on like an environmental data set, and the winner will win $1,500. So yeah, $1,500. So lots of cool community events out there.
Yeah, and I mean there are community events too, like Viz for Social Good, where it's like, it may not necessarily be for a prize, but it might be just for that good feeling, that kind of warmness of, hey, I helped an organization, I did some volunteer work, and it's always kind of nice to have that. Not necessarily always just doing this for work. You're definitely helping folks out. Really cool events and organizations out there too. Also, you can get groups together at work to do these too. If you've got a larger group, a larger office, you can actually go through and do some of these together. I remember one of the jobs we used to do the Workout Wednesdays together, or sometimes a Makeover Monday together as a group, and always kind of fun to see what people came up with.
Skip to head right to the next slide, the work events. So this next heading is just, in the future. So after you've kind of done your post-conference, now it's time to jump out into how do we have this energy and community all the time, not just, the week after the conference. And so, like he said, getting a group together to do maybe once a month, like a Workout Wednesday or a Make It Over Monday or something. You can do office hours. A lot of places have office hours. You can do like a day-to-day, which Cesar can talk about a little bit more about, but like basically plan these events, and you can do them virtually too. You can ask your department leader, say, hey, can we get a little bit of budget if somebody comes to like a lunchtime session? Could they, expense a drink from a coffee shop, or, a lunch, expense a lunch or something, and then, kind of bribe people to come to some kind of community building event at the company.
Yeah, these are fun because once again, it depends on kind of how big the organization is. Sometimes, if it's really small, you can actually do a virtual event with people who are, in different offices across the country, or, sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be your office. It can be, people you met at conference or people you met at that user group. You can get these together. So yeah, definitely, it all changes based on kind of what you have. But something we did when I was working for the federal government was we had a lot of users, we had a lot of licenses, and we went and booked that giant conference room and got everybody together to have a data day. And we brought in the vendors we work with. Tableau had folks come through. We had guest speakers who were external, who were actually having a lot of success with Tableau, and also internally, some of our kind of those power users, but I really hate using the term power users, but they're really, doing a lot with Tableau, and the way they visualize made an impact. So it's fun to show that off, but then immediately afterwards, you start to see a couple of copycat projects that look exactly like those. But it's a start. It gets people starting to visualize and understanding, how to make an impact with not just, a quick visual, but building something that can be dynamic and can, really keep going. So a lot of fun to hear from people and kind of what they built. Oh, this is the fun one. Yes.
Yeah. So, this question that I had for Cesar when we were making this presentation, I was asking him questions because Cesar has a lot more experience with this in-person community than I do. I just kind of participate in things online. And a lot of my participation is kind of presentation style, where I just post what I'm thinking and people can comment on it if they want, but it doesn't really matter. Whereas if you host like a Makeover Monday, or a day-to-day, it's like, I just was thinking about doing this at my company where we don't really have a strong Tableau community yet. And I'm like, well, what if nobody comes? Like, what if nobody shows up and you is it awkward? Like, how do you handle if nobody shows up?
And it does occasionally happen. I know we've done, doctor lunch and learns where, we've sat in a conference room kind of by ourselves with our lunch and waited for folks to come. But it's rare. And kind of the way I look at it, and I think I mentioned this to Annie, is I kind of come from a snowboarding, mountain biking kind of background where, you kind of look to where you want to go and not necessarily to where you don't want to go. Because the moment you fixate on that, you kind of just naturally start heading towards, something that really won't give you what you want. It doesn't give you that result. So, a lot of it is kind of that positive thought. And, well, we'll do this. And, it's kind of, really, it's like if you get a spot, if you get, things for people to kind of munch on, a couple pizzas or so, you get the people to present and just kind of put it all together. Somehow a event just happens, and that's kind of the fun part of event planning. So yeah, don't worry too much about no one showing up. If you give people enough time and you put enough energy into it, and you do make sure that everyone knows, then in some cases you'll see project managers canceling meetings, leaders sending their staff through and to your event. So it's actually definitely really cool to see when you start to hear, oh, this manager, this director, that vice president wants everybody to go to the day-to-day, and they've canceled everything for that day. That's so rewarding.
Yeah. Something to watch out with when you go home is that there's this kind of shorthand that everybody knows now. Actually, before we jump into this, Calvin had said that the thing I was talking about that has the prize in New York City, it's the New York Tech Week, and shared a link to that. Also offering food. I mean, people show up for donuts and pizza. They show up.
Funny what a couple cookies will do too. Yeah, sometimes at the right part of the day.
Yeah, but this you now have this kind of shorthand data language. So when you speak at the Tableau conference, Tableau provides some slides that you can just use if you want to. And one of them was this thank you data fam one. And we had included it, but I moved it down here because it's kind of relevant to this point. I find data fam is like one of those words. We've got a lot of words that we know in the Tableau community that other people might not know. So like tooltip and viz, and what's the difference between a dashboard and a sheet and a view, and all of these different lingo things. And so just be mindful when you go back to your organization of these languages, like these words and this language that you have, that it can feel exclusionary. It can make people feel not very smart. Remember, I was in a meeting with a senior director one time, and at the beginning of the meeting, I said that tooltips are the hover over, when you hover your mouse over, but there was a lot going on in that meeting and she didn't catch it. So then later on I was using the word tooltip and she was like, hang on, I just want to ask a quick question. Tooltip, does that mean like when you hover over the data point? And I was like, yes. So I try to be really careful not to use language. So this data fam, I learned after the conference, was something that I guess like the Tableau marketing team has really grabbed onto as well. So it's part of why it's a big thing at conferences. So I find that there's kind of this split where people in the Tableau community know this. Basically, data fam just means like anybody who's in data and like likes to use Tableau and stuff. When I was first getting into data, I was in Tableau. I was like, am I in this data fam? Am I not? Like it was, I just wasn't sure about using it, and I kind of felt really alienated by it. I also noticed that it was a really big thing on Twitter to use that hashtag, and I wasn't on Twitter. And so it just felt very alienating to me, this data fam term. But I learned now that everybody is part of the data fam. You don't have to feel alienated. But actually, after this session at the conference, when we talked about this, I had multiple people message me or comment and say, like, I felt that same way. Like, I felt the same way. I felt excluded by the data fam term. I still don't know if I'm in it. It makes me feel weird. And so I made a post about it on LinkedIn. And on the other side, I had multiple people who are like in the community for a long time being like, that's not what it means. Apparently it's like a bat symbol of like calling other people to you and saying that you are welcome here. But I think it's worth putting some thought into. If everyone in the community thinks, oh, it's a term that I use to relate to other people in the community, and it's very inclusionary. But if everyone out of the community says, I feel kind of alienated by this, it's just worth putting thought which contexts and which situations you use differently.
There's Chris. Chris is on.
In there. Chris is one of the people. He left a long comment being like, everyone is included.
Yes,
This is not what it means. Feel free to leave your comment and I will spotlight it, Chris.
And I want to jump in really quick too, because it's like it was a fun post you put out there, which could have been controversial too, and I think a lot of people saw it as controversial. And one of the things that got me was so when I met Annie, it's like this is kind of what she was putting together, right? So it's on my desk, but yeah, so really it's kind of this idea of, you know, I've been in the community for a long time. I actually saw, you know, the DataFam hashtag start up, and I did an interview for Tableau about DataFam, and one of the first things I think I said is like, you know, how do you feel about this? I'm like, at first I was a little upset because it was kind of my thing, you know, this is, you know, my group of friends, and all of a sudden it became a marketing item, which I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. And it wasn't until I think one of the conferences, there was a community event, and they put together a DataFam T-shirt. And this is a DataFam T-shirt with a palm tree, and the community leaders were there, and they were so excited to get these to us because they had this look of like, look what we put together for you guys. And that's when I think everything crystallized was, oh, they did this for us. You know, this is not necessarily, you know, I think their way of kind of describing kind of this weird group of, you know, really obsessive people about kind of the visualization and the tool that they work for. But yeah, we're actually a pretty cool group. And it's interesting because, you know, meeting Annie, who was, you know, new to the community, really new to really the data world too, but kind of, well, we got kind of also just coming into it. You did open my eyes to this. Oh, hey, you know what? Yeah, we were kind of we're different, but yeah, if you're looking at us from the outside, it might be hard to kind of think about how to break in. There's certain things that, you know, that shorthand, you know, I'll drop, you know, Zen, or I'll drop, you know, visionary or ambassador, and this doesn't mean anything to anyone who's outside of that group. There's so many little things, you know, as we talk about pills, you know, who's going to know about what a red pill or a blue pill or a green pill means? And, you know, to really be kind to those who don't speak the data viz language, because it's kind of, we're kind of on the inside, and it's kind of become our shorthand. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily exclusionary. We definitely want to include people, and that's kind of why we do this. I think part of why we're doing this session too is to show folks that, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, it's funny. I think I preferred DataFam to Tabloony, which was at one point used to to describe the folks that were pretty fanatical about their use of Tableau. But definitely it's inclusionary, and it's meant to help folks kind of progress in. But I mean, some of the conversations we had, Annie, about like user groups, you know, I think when I first described it to you, you're like, why have I never heard of this? Why am I just finding out about this? Mm-hmm. And it definitely opened my eyes to, hey, you know what? Yeah, we've got to reach out to newer folks along channels that they're in, not necessarily the channels that we all live in.
Yeah. So one of the big reasons we wanted to do this talk was because, like, I got into data analytics. I had over 50,000 followers on TikTok and on LinkedIn, and I admittedly very much in the community of data people, and I became a Tableau consultant. And it wasn't until 6 to 7 months into being a Tableau consultant that I really started to pick up on, like, the Workout Wednesday, Makeover Monday, Tableau user groups. And I remember thinking, like, I felt so uncomfortable with the idea of going to a Tableau user group because, like, I was a Tableau consultant, like, I knew it, but I didn't know who it was for, what it was going to be. And I realized after the conference that the Tableau community is actually really powerful. People get jobs from just engaging in the Tableau community all the time. And so realizing that it's really powerful and there's people that just want to support you and to see you do well was this kind of like, oh, interesting. Like, how can I share this with other people? So the kind of big takeaway for this session for me was like, I wanted to share kind of between the conference last year when I learned about this amazing community of people, and then the conference this year of like how many things have happened. And Cesar and I both have stories about this. But for me, like last year when I went to the conference, I just got involved with the community of people. And since then, this year, like in the meantime, I feel like I've gotten connected with so many people who have like great blogs. They have a lot of good tips. I learned a tip from people that I just met through this community that the Tableau forums, which Chris, who had commented, is just got like an award for being like a forum fanatic. Basically, my organization has like multiple Tableau support cases open right now for some problems we're having. And people at the conference were like, open a community forums post about it. Because in the community forums, people compete to answer your question. Like when you're talking to support, you're essentially competing to get support's attention, and you're never quite sure who you're going to get, to be honest. But the community forums, there's a lot of really knowledgeable people, and they will compete to answer your questions. And so like little things like that. And then also for like engaging in the community, last year I met Cesar, but I went to the Tableau conference last year because I was looking for a job, and I was looking for a consulting job. But after, and I didn't put this tip in earlier, you can connect with the speakers. So before I went to the conference last year, I looked at all the sessions I was most excited about and messaged all the speakers. And then I said, hey, I'd love to, chat with you after the session if there's time. So after the sessions, I went up, chatted with the speakers. Speakers love that. They love when you're excited about what they're excited about, basically. And one of the speakers that I had messaged, we were chatting for about 10 minutes, and she's like, oh, we should get connected on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, we actually already are. I sent you a message. I was really excited about this session. And she was like, oh, that was you? I loved that. And she got really excited. And then I came home from the conference, and she had said, oh, I'd love for you to work for me. But she was working at an organization that was full-time and not consulting. And I wanted to stay as a consultant, just not where I was consulting last year. But I came home from the conference, and I put a lot of energy into like, okay, here's all the excitement that I have around building visualizations and stuff. And so I went out and I did this big push on my Tableau public portfolio and on LinkedIn to be doing a lot of things and being very present and very visible. So everyone that I had just connected with at the conference were now seeing me like doing a lot of really cool things. And so a couple weeks later, that woman messaged me, and she's like, hey, would you be interested in applying for a role at my company? We have a role opening up, and I think you'd be a really good fit for it. And I said yes, because I was really interested. She had kind of sold me on her company, 100% remote, which I love. And then like 3 weeks after that, I got laid off. And so I was like, okay, I'm definitely looking for a job now. And then, so that was the VP of data and analytics at GitLab, where I work now. So I started in August. So the conference was in May. I started at GitLab in August, and I'm still there, and I love it. And I spoke at the conference this session, but I also did a session like with my coworker from GitLab. So it just worked really, really well for me. All these things that we're saying in this session, it's not just fluff tips. Like this is like essentially I unpacked all of the most impactful things from my story and my journey and shoved them into a session.
It's incredible. I think from a guy who's gotten his last 2 jobs from people he's met, or I've been tipped off about him from people I met at the conference. It makes a difference. It really is impressive to just know, it's like if you're wandering around, you might be offered a job. I think actually it's funny. I think meeting Chris, who's in the chat, I remember talking to him about it. It's like, hey, I can pack up and just kind of go anywhere. And he's like, wait, I've got somebody for you to meet. And it came out to really a cool, fun way of meeting people all over the world where you can share this this knowledge you have. And really it becomes a way where you start to realize that your skills are very valuable, And now in a remote kind of workplace, it doesn't really matter where you are. You can work for companies just about anywhere. It's more about the time zones and the differences there. But yeah, really, if you kind of go out and you have some passion for this, and you really do what you love, you get to know a lot of more people in the community, and it can definitely make a huge difference.
I stopped the share because that was the end of it.
Yeah.
Wow, what time is it? It is 12:56. So we did this in 40 minutes at the conference, but having all of the input from the chat, this was like the perfect. We ended up like just perfect length of time.
Yeah, I think we wanted to take some Q&A during the conference, but I think we used up all the time there. So we had a couple people stay behind and talk to us, and that's one of the cool tips there too, is talk to the speakers, get up and meet them.
Yeah,
they'll remember you.
I love that. Yeah, so if anybody has anything that they want to share about their stories in the chat, or any questions or stuff, the chat is still open. Otherwise, Cesar, the conference this year, what would you say was do you have any big takeaways, or things that you were like, wow, that was a new thing for me?
There was a lot. Actually, I started to see there's a lot of the community. There's really the reliance on community, I think, is going to become big, and I think we'll start to foster new components to Tableau, where now you've got folks like you and I, where we can start building almost a plug-in type environment, where we're building extensions and building cool things that we can actually put in. I had some fun conversations, and gave a lot of good feedback for these extensions and kind of the future of this. So I'm excited about that. So,
yeah, it's
what about you?
I think Tableau started on the side of low code, no code, drag, drop, click. And they still have that, but then they're going the other direction. One thing that I've been surprised to not hear about is improvements on how Tableau handles performance and speed. I know that this is a database linked thing, but I know that there's entire companies that exist just to help you sit in between the database and Tableau so it can go faster. And as we datatize everything, there's data for everything, and these data sets keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm surprised that I haven't heard specifically Salesforce saying, oh, you have a 1 billion row data set, you can still do that in our tool. Don't go anywhere else. I'm surprised that we haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's actually kind of what I end up doing a lot of, and a lot of the sessions I do is how to kind of jam pack tons of data into this.
You heard of this Blue Sky? I've never even heard of Blue Sky before.
Yeah, Blue Sky is it's kind of it was started by the founder of Twitter after everything happened. Yeah, the takeover. So I got an invite. I just never really set anything up. So yeah, I got to check it out. I think there's a lot of folks on Blue Sky now, and I heard a lot about it at the conference.
Yeah, I was never on Twitter, so I never felt the need to replace Twitter with something else. LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn. Well, we are almost at time. Thanks for chatting. This will be available on YouTube and LinkedIn after. And if you go to my LinkedIn page, I have a handout that I made that I put a lot of effort into, and then we didn't even get it into the presentation. So.
Oh, well, yes, but no, it'll be great, and I think it'll help out a lot of folks.
Yeah. So thanks everybody who did come. This has been great too, because I love when people come and comment in the comment section, and we get to have this kind of collaborative experience. So thanks for everybody who tuned in and they chatted with us. This was great. So.
Thanks, Rudy. Yeah.
All right. Bye, everybody. Hang on, Cesar. It will keep you in.